Welcome back. Continuing the discussion we just had in a prior video about the history of Roman comedy, I'm now going to introduce you to the formal genre that is referred to when we speak about Roman comedy. The name for a play in Latin is fabula. Here it's in the plural, fabulae. Now, a fabula is just that. It's a story, and it can also be a play performed on stage. Now, the Roman literary critics defined several different types of fabulae put on stage, and the terminology that's used for those has to do with articles of clothing, and they are concerned with whether the play is predominantly tragic or comic, although in fact that line can be often blurred, and also whether the play is based on a Greek model or is considered to be a genuine original Roman work with Roman concerns and a Roman setting. So there are, as I mentioned, there are several different kinds. For instance, there's one called togatai, which is a Roman comedy that's placed in a genuine Roman setting as opposed to a Greek setting. And then there are other ones like praetextai, for instance, which refers to the formal Roman toga that refers to serious drama, again, that's put in a Roman setting. But we don't have those surviving, so therefore we're only going to discuss here the one that we actually do have surviving, and that is the Fabulae Palliatae. This is the kind of play that you are reading when you read Miles Gloriosus, or the Braggart Soldier of Plautus, and the Adelphoi, or the Brothers of Terence. So the Fabula Palliatae means stories that are literally cloaked in the pallium, which is essentially a form of cloak that with a hood that's worn by the comic actors. So this is saying that we have comedy predominantly, although it doesn't necessarily exclusively have to be comedy, but it is predominantly comedy that is based on a specific Greek original. So that and we actually have descriptions in the prologues of both the plays that you're reading in the course, the Miles Gloriosus and the Adelphoi, that tell us what the original plays were from the Greek authors that the Romans are picking up and adapting for themselves. So in some cases we can trace the connection directly. In many cases we've lost the original works, but can still piece together what works existed back then that we can use today. So the Fabulae Palliatae, therefore, are plays, as we say, that are based specifically on Greek originals, and generally, there should be a single play from the Greek world that is brought over to be used in the Roman world. In actuality, however, as Terence discusses in close detail in his prologue in Adelphoi, there was a convention that was not really accepted in the Roman world all that much of contaminatio, which is the blending of two or more plays together, so that you might, for instance, have a predominant modeling on one play, but then along the way some other play's extra scene gets thrown in order to add some spice to the original play, and so you end up really with a mixture of multiple plays together. Officially, the Romans appear not to have liked that, but both Plautus and Terence engaged in the practice, and in Adelphoi, which is the final play that Terence produced, he's a little bit huffy in his prologue, defending himself against the charge of contaminatio, saying, well, others, and I think by that he includes Plautus, others do it too, and I'm perfectly happy to tell you that I have this play, but then there's this scene and so forth mixed into it. So Terence does not believe that there's any difficulty with carrying out contaminatio, and that the plays should not be criticized for it, nor the playwrights who wrote them. Okay, so Fabulae Palliatae, again, are plays based on Greek models. They could be Menander, could be Philemon, could be Diphilus, whatever they might be, based on Greek models and brought over into the Roman setting. Bear in mind, of course, that in the original Greek plays, these dramas would have been put on in a much larger stage, and of course a permanent stage with the theater and the seats and so forth, a large round theater that we discussed near the beginning of this course, a much larger stage than the one the Romans would have been using, where now we have, of course, the much smaller temporary wooden stage. So that changes things considerably. Okay, so the Fabulae Palatae, again, based on Greek models. Where do they get those models from? We have the Atellan farce. This is a local form of essentially farce play. It's actually here where we get a lot of the stock characters that we hear about in later Roman comedy, like the cook, the slave, the old man, and so forth. And one name that seems to have circulated attached to those characters was Maccus, M-A-C-C-U-S, and it's thought that very likely Maccus was the one who gave his name eventually to Plautus, his family name, Titus Maccius Plautus, since we don't know whether the name Maccius was a genuine one. So there's the Atellan farce, which again is local Italic farce that influences the Greek-based comedy, and then also another form of banter poetry called Fiscinine. This was especially sung at a wedding or some other special occasion, and it was often banter poetry used to essentially tease somebody who was undergoing some great celebration, again, like a wedding. Superstitious reasons for doing that might have been, for instance, to keep the evil eye away, like by criticizing the person right there, or seeming to do so, you're not like celebrating and vaunting and having a wonderful time, and thereby potentially invoking bad luck to catch you later. So both of these find their way into the Fabulae Palatae. As far as their production, it's important to note again that these Fabulae Palatae were not produced in permanent stages the way that the large Greek theaters were. In fact, in Rome, we don't have any record of a permanent theater at all until 55 BC, when Pompey the Great built, to our knowledge, the first permanent Roman theater. And that's, as you can see, is a good over a century after the productions of Plautus and Terence. So these wooden stages would have been built near a shrine to the particular god who was being worshipped, and would have been part of a carnival atmosphere with a lot of distractions. So this is, as you can well imagine, not conducive to close fixed attention on a particular play, because it would not be uncommon for a play to be underway and for the audience to suddenly see acrobats and go running off to watch the acrobats, or a tightrope walker and go running off to see the tightrope walker. And a different play by Terence called A Mother-in-Law, the Hecaira, he scolds his audience quite severely because it took him 3 times to put on that play before finally the audience willingly got themselves through the entire play without running off to watch some distracting event. So keeping the attention of the audience was sometimes quite difficult. This also meant that the playwright had to rely a great deal on stage direction that was right there on stage. So when you read the 2 plays of Plautus and Terence, especially the Plautus one, you'll see characters saying seemingly reluctantly, "Oh, wait, I hear the door opening." And probably it's because this play is being put forward to a rather drunk audience that might not be paying attention entirely. So therefore, the character has to go out of his way to indicate to the inattentive audience, guess what? There's another character coming on stage. I hear the door opening. And so that's why that phrase is often used in order to give a lot of instructions. You also notice how Dexter, too, in his prologue, has to be very excessively detailed about constantly saying, okay, it's this house, which is where the old man lives. And it's over here where the man lives who's going to help me to take care of the woman who's over here. Remember now, it's that old man. The woman lives over here in the major's house. Remember now, this is where I'm a slave. I'm trying to get away from this major, and I'm trying to get the woman away from the major too. And remember, the woman is going to maybe sneak over to this house where the old man lives. So remember now, the major's over here and the old man's over here. So you can see all those extra details are put in. Again, maybe because the story is rather complicated and the audience might need some help to actually go through the play and be able to understand what's going on. So you have the temporary wooden stage, and in order to keep things easy and conventional, the background for one of these Roman plays would always have been either 2, here we are, 2 or 3 doorways. So you would have a central doorway, and then one to this way and one to this way, so 3 altogether. Or if you only need 2 doors, as in the case of the braggart soldier, then you'll have a door over here and a door over here. And then you have a street in front, and all of the action happens there on the street. And usually in one direction on that street leads to downtown, and the other direction probably leads to the harbor. So these actual cities where these were produced could be Athens, could be Ephesus, as in the case of the braggart soldier, or some other prominent Greek place. Sometimes Sicily could be used. But if the Greek original play, as one would expect, was in a Greek setting, then the Romans will keep that particular setting as close as possible to the original, and also any Greek names that the Romans can pick up and transfer over into the Latin will also be maintained as closely as possible. So remember that when you're reading your Plautus play, the names that are given to you are just simply the effort of the editors there to make the play as readable for you as possible. The Greek names are funny, but they're unfortunately rather difficult, and so to make it easier for you to read that play, different names have been supplied for the characters. But remember, those names are not, in fact, the original ones that would have been used by the author. Those are provided for you in parentheses in the Dramatis Personae at the beginning of the play, just so that you can have reference. If you want to, in fact, read the play in the original without the changed names, you can go to the Perseus database and look up Plautus's Miles Gloriosus, the original Latin name, there, and you can read the English translation with the original Greek and Latin names intact. Okay, so again, summarizing, this is the genre, Fabulae Palliatae, that Plautus and Terence are writing in. It's literally the play that's dressed up in a cloak. And so this is, again, the Greek-based play, the Greek cloak, the Greek-based play that is transferred over into Roman literature, translated into Latin, and produced on the Roman stage. Okay, we have a couple more videos to go, and we have one more subject to cover in this course, which is Roman satire and novel, to give you some additional insights into how the comic spirit spread from the original old comedy into multiple genres across time. Okay, we'll see you next video for satire and novel.